One of the most common things I hear from people is, I want to start the Mediterranean diet, but what should I eat? In this video, we are going to tackle this question head on so you stop guessing and start thriving with the Mediterranean diet. Now, if you've tried to follow the Mediterranean diet before, but you've gotten a little lost after olive oil and fish, let me make this very easy for you. The first principle of the Mediterranean diet is simple. Eat real food. But after teaching this lifestyle to over 30,000 people, I've learned that there's still a lot of confusion about what that actually means. So over the next several minutes, I'm going to teach you the exact system that I use inside my private community called Take Back Your Life to help my clients classify food into three very simple categories. So here they are. Good food. Well, these are foods that you should be eating freely on any healthy diet, and especially with the Mediterranean diet. And then we have bad food. These are foods you'd ideally want to avoid if you can. And then the third category is what I call the gray zone food. And these are foods that seem healthy, but they may actually hurt your progress. So by the end of this video, everything's going to be crystal clear and you are going to have these groups down pat. You'll finally know exactly what to eat and what to leave on the shelf so that you can start following the Mediterranean diet with confidence. Hey, I'm Dr. Anna, your med diet doc. And before we dive in, if you want in on my insider teachings like this and so much more, make sure you join us inside the Take Back Your Life community, which is my private group. The link is in the description below. So let's get started with the good food category. Now, these are foods that you can and should eat freely. These are whole, real, minimally processed ingredients that your body knows exactly what to do with them and recognizes them. So what are we talking about? We're talking about vegetables and fruits, things like healthy sources of oil, olives, walnuts, avocados, of course, extra virgin olive oil, the oil squeezed out of those olives. And then we're talking about fish, and it could be any variety, salmon, sardines, mackerel, tuna, anchovies, you name it. And then things like legumes, any variety of bean or lentil, even the chickpeas. And we also have whole grains, so things like farro, oats, brown rice, any grain you can imagine, and any variety of seed and any variety of nut that comes in whole form. And then we have all of our high quality proteins, whether these are things derived from soy, like tofu, tempeh, or soybeans themselves, or things sourced from animals, eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, ricotta, and then actual meat themselves. It could be turkey, or it could be chicken, any kind of poultry, duck, and then even things like some red meat. Now, all of these foods are pretty straightforward and easy to understand. They have not been stripped down, they are not chemically altered, and they are not packed with chemicals and additives and colorants and preservatives. These are foods as they come from nature. So how do you know if something is a good food? Well, here's a very simple test you can do. If you go to the grocery store and your cart is full of vegetables, produce, fruits, whole grains, legumes, high quality proteins, healthy sources of fat, essentially things that are not coming in a package with a label, then you're doing great. And if your cart is full of boxes, bottles, packaging, things with tons of marketing on the front of it, well, it might be time to rethink what you're buying. Now, by the way, if you want a free tool that helps you shop with confidence, I've created a free downloadable guide called the Grocery Shopping Zone Guide. And it is the same tool that we use in our community, and it helps you know exactly what to buy and the things to avoid. It's going to make grocery shopping extremely simple for you. You will find the link in the description below this video. All right, now let's move on to our second category, which is bad food. Caveat, I never like to demonize anything, but when I'm trying to teach these big principles, it's easy to use these qualifying terms, good, bad, etc. So just take what I'm saying in context of what we're thinking about for building our overall healthy Mediterranean diet. Now, so what is bad food? Why do I call it bad? Well, these are the things you'd want to avoid because we know that they can lead to some health problems if they're consumed in excess, meaning all the time and in high quantities. So these are typically foods that are not part of the traditional Mediterranean diet, meaning the diet that has all the research behind it. What are these things? You could probably guess. They're those super ultra processed foods, things made in a lab or a factory, and recognizing them starts to get easier once you really know what to look for. So this does actually constitute as like a skill that you'll start to build up. So how do you spot something that we constitute as a bad food? Well, right off the bat, these are foods that don't exist in nature the way that you find them in the grocery store. So you would never see, for example, these different color crackers or rainbow cereals from a tree or a shrub. right? That's something that's made in a lab and made by a manufacturer. Usually, these things are also sold in boxes, bottles, plastic wrappers, things with lots of marketing and packaging on them. But please be aware, something is not defined as a bad food simply because it comes in a bottle. For example, extra virgin olive oil, you're not going to squeeze your own olive oil. You're going to buy that in a bottle too. And certainly that is considered a healthy food and a very crucial part of the Mediterranean diet. What's more important is the thing on the back of the package or the ingredient list. If you start seeing ingredient lists that are super duper long with lots of specifically chemicals, preservatives, colorants, not only something you can't pronounce, but something that's added just for the texture, the color, or a lot of extra sugar, you start to get an idea that this is a really manufactured and processed food. But remember, just because you can't pronounce something doesn't mean it's harmful. There are lots of added nutrients, supplemented vitamins or minerals added into foods to boost up the nutrition profile, and sometimes they work as natural preservatives. So just because you can't pronounce something doesn't actually make it bad for your body. You do have to understand that. But long story short, the foods that are bad are designed to last for months sitting on a shelf without getting moldy. And specifically, they're designed to make you crave them and want to keep buying them. That's the whole concept behind it. So these are usually not items in the Mediterranean diet. Now, this last part is key, so let me repeat it. The foods in the bad food category were designed by a human, a manufacturer, a food engineer, a scientist, specifically to make the food hyper palatable with its texture, its colors, its flavor. So even if it seems convenient or familiar, these foods are actively working against your body. And you need to be aware of this. They are not part of the traditional Mediterranean diet. Often, things with lots of extra chemicals, preservatives, additives, colorants, they can disrupt your metabolism. They can confuse your body's hunger and fullness signals, and they can also increase your risk for certain chronic diseases. So let's talk about some examples of bad food. And no, I'm not going to name call any brands, but just follow along. You can probably start to visualize some of these food products that you can see in your grocery store. So frozen items that are pre-processed and pre-packaged, like chicken nuggets or fish tenders, things with lots of binders and preservatives. How about all of those sugary breakfast pastries? Sometimes they're meant for a toaster and they have coated colorings and lots of special flavors added into them. And what about any white flour product that's made with loads of added sugar and chemical conditioners, especially if one of the first ingredients, if not the first ingredient, is sugar? And what about all those bottled drinks? Sometimes they're caffeinated drinks or coffee beverages that have tons of processed oils and sugars and syrups added into them. And then what about those extra unique foods that absolutely don't resemble the foods they originally come from, like nacho cheese dip? So you can start to understand the bottom line here is that if a food has more than, let's say, 10 ingredients, ballpark, it usually doesn't resemble the ingredients that it naturally comes from. And if it's not going to expire in months sitting on a shelf, then it probably does not belong in your kitchen or in your Mediterranean diet. That's the simplest way I can explain that. Okay, now we're going to move on to the third category, which is what I call the gray zone foods. And these are foods that often look healthy, but they're not always healthy. So how do you know if something is a gray zone food? These are the foods that really confuse most people. And the way you can identify them is that there's something about it that seems healthy. Maybe it has a label on the front that tells you it gives you a specific health benefit, or there are mostly pretty good ingredients in there. But then when it boils down to it, some of the things in there are also considered kind of bad ingredients for your body if you're eating it in excess. So then how do you know if a food falls into this category? Well, to figure it out, I like to use these two simple tests. Test number one is the ingredient test. So similar to what we just talked about with our bad food category, for this, you will have to flip the package over to the back and just go right to the ingredient list. If there's even one of the following in that list, the food probably falls in this category. Tons of added sugar. And this can come in so many varieties. There are very many names for sugar these days. So it could say cane sugar, syrups, corn sugars, things like maltodextrin. It could have molasses or honey, or just lots of other names for sugars that start to come into play, fruit juice extracts and different kinds of syrups. And what about all those products with the refined flour? Even if it's enriched, which means they're adding nutrition back in, if it's still coming from white flour, you know they stripped out all the fiber there, which is the part that gives you so much health benefit. And then a lot of these really industrially processed oils. No, I am not saying seed oils because I think that that is a little bit of hype and it's confusing the part that's actually a problem for our health. I'm specifically talking about oils that are processed and manufactured and altered that become a little bit less healthy for us, especially when the oils are hydrogenated or even partially hydrogenated. We know that those are linked to health problems. And then what about all of those other artificial sweeteners or non-caloric sweeteners, other things like gums, preservatives, thickeners? Well, they're not inherently bad, but the challenge is we're seeing these in so many products these days that it's almost hard to get away from them when you're buying a lot of packaged and processed foods. And I'm just not convinced that the accumulation of eating a lot of these ingredients is actually good for you. And what I can definitely tell you is they're not a part of the Mediterranean diet. So even if a product says low sugar or plant-based or keto and you're following some of these patterns, if it does include a lot of these ingredients, or even if it includes some of them, but you eat it a lot, it's probably not the best choice for your Mediterranean diet approach. Okay, what's the second test? Well, this is one that I certainly didn't make up. You probably heard this before, but it's called the grandma test. So the idea being, if you took somebody from a couple of generations ago and you asked them, would they recognize this food item in front of you? And the answer is no, then it probably tells you it's not part of the traditional Mediterranean diet. It's not a real whole food. It doesn't directly come from nature and it doesn't resemble the ingredients that are actually in there. So how do you then combine these two tests to figure out, is this food something you should be including or should be avoiding in your Mediterranean diet? Well, let's combine the two tests. If both tests are passed, then you're probably looking at a good food or something that at least can be consumed on a fairly regular basis. What happens if one of these tests fails? Either the ingredients test or the grandma test. Well, use your discretion and you decide, does this fall into the good category truly, or maybe is it a gray zone food? Is this just an extra special occasion that you want to enjoy this thing as a treat? Be my guest. So you have to kind of use your thinking cap to figure out if one of the two tests is not passed. But then what if both tests are failed? Well, I would say likely that falls into the bad food category, even if the front packaging is telling you otherwise or somebody else in your life is encouraging you to eat this thing. Use your thinking cap when you're trying to figure out if this food fits into your Mediterranean diet. Okay, so let's recap for just a second. Our very simple approach boils down to this. With the Mediterranean diet, your goal is to eat good food. Real, whole, Mediterranean ingredients. And ideally, you'd want to avoid bad food. These super ultra processed and artificial food products that barely resemble the original ingredients they come from. And then it's important to just watch out for those gray zone foods, things that kind of fall in between. Read the labels, check the ingredients, or use your ingredient and grandma test to figure it out. This simple system is going to help you navigate any grocery store, any restaurant, any meal. It is designed to be used on the go or in your home, wherever you are eating. And don't forget, you don't have to get lost in the sauce here. I have a very easy to use, free tool to help you. It's my downloadable guide linked in the description below, the free grocery shopping zone guide. And it is there to help you. And I want you to make sure you use it and get all the benefit out of it. And at this point, now that you know exactly what to eat, the next question is, well, how do you combine these ingredients into meals that actually fill you up and keep your blood sugar stable? That is exactly what we're going to cover in the next video, how to build the balanced Mediterranean meals. I want you to keep your knowledge going, so click onto this video and I will see you over there.